It's wonderful to be sharing with you guys. It's amazing the technology that I can come in high definition in Estonia from Chicago of all places. This to me is just an amazing opportunity. So I really believe that we can really consider, we could turn learning on its head. I think it's very powerful what we can do with education. So let me get started by, if you're all interested in flipped classroom or flipped learning, I'm just going to put some websites up there. I'm not going to take too much time. I'll talk real quickly because I don't have a whole lot of time. If you're interested in really continuing the dialogue, myself and Aaron Sams, we started this website, flippedclassroom.org. We have 19,000 educators from around the world sharing about the flipped classroom. And so if you're interested in learning about that, we've also got a nonprofit website, flippedlearning.org. And then Aaron and I have one company together, flippedclass.com. And then if you want to read my blog where I talk about a lot of stuff, I've got links to a bunch of different flipped class resources there. I would encourage you to go to those websites. But I wanted to start by just saying hi. I am, at my heart, I am just a teacher. I am simply a teacher, a person who loves to spend time with kids, teaching kids. That's what I am. And a lot of people ask, when you first start teaching, they say, what do you teach? And you know what I teach? I teach kids. That's what I teach. Yeah, I happen to also teach science, but I primarily am a person who teaches kids. But I also believe in something fundamental, and that is that I believe that the value of class time is also in building relationships. We need to connect with kids. So often, I'm not sure this is true in Estonia, but I bet it is that we have spent a lot of energy and time trying to teach stuff, content. For me, it was chemistry, and it was biology, and it was physics, and it was astronomy. Those are the things I was supposed to teach, and I am supposed to teach that, and we want our kids to learn those things, but there's something very, very important about the value of relationships with kids. So, kind of with that backdrop, I'm going to kind of walk you through the technology throughout my career. So I'm getting older, right? I'm 50 years old now, and when I first started teaching, the technology I had available to me was this. I had one of these. You guys remember those, right? They're called a chalkboard. So I just had a chalkboard, and then I got an upgrade technologically. I got one of these. I know you guys remember that? That's called an overhead projector. And I got one of those, and that was an amazing device. It was very cool. And then many years later, I got something kind of like what you're probably watching me on right now. I got a device that hooked up to my computer, and it was the coolest thing. I could do PowerPoints. How cool is that? Right? But wait, there's a problem with each of these pictures. With this picture, and with this picture. You know what the problem is? It's all about me. You walked into my class and you learned from me. I was the one who you learned from. It was teacher-centered. It was not learner-centered. So I think there should be a better way to teach than this. Let me play a short video clip from a popular movie. I'll bet you'll recognize this.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
So that's a humorous video clip from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, a film shot here in the United States, in fact in Chicago. And but with all the humor, there's also elements of truth, isn't there? I mean, have you ever sat in that class? Have you ever been in a classroom where your teacher was, well, that boring? And let's confess, okay? So I taught for 19 years before I flipped my class, and I was a traditional teacher. I taught in that traditional manner. Now, hopefully, I was more engaging than the actor in the movie, but I had kids who fell asleep in my class. I had kids who were disengaged and were not listening for lots of reasons. So I believe we're in this amazing period of change in the world of education. What I mean by the world of education, let me take you back in my life. When I was a student, if I wanted to access information, there were 3 ways I could access that information. Number 1, I could get it from the textbooks. Number 2, the libraries. And number 3, from the heads of my teachers. But that's not the world we live in today. We live in a very different world. So here I have my cell phone. I'm going to ask it a question, and I'm going to get some information. What about if we do this? What is the population of Estonia?
The population of Estonia is about 1,312,000.
All right, so there's 1.3 million people in Estonia. I had no idea before this moment that answer. That's how we can access information. It is so easy today. The world has changed. Let me show you a picture, I think, that illustrates it almost better than anything else. It's actually 2 pictures. One picture taken in 2005 and one in 2013. And it is a bunch of people standing in Rome at St. Peter's Square waiting for the new Pope to walk out on the balcony. Look at these 2 pictures and tell me that the world has changed. Doesn't that speak so much? I mean, if you look at the picture, you got one early adopter right here in the front corner right here, and they've got a flip phone right there. Everybody else, though, in 2013, that's not that long ago, folks. In 8 years, think how the world has dramatically changed. We need to move away from this classroom, this teacher-centered, lecture-driven classroom, well, to these classrooms, to project-based, to inquiry-driven, to learner-centered, to 21st century classrooms of the future. But how do we get there? All right? We have to get there. Well, before we get there, I want to tell you one more thing about me. And you'll see how this all connects. You see, at my heart as a person, I am a learner. I love to learn. And you know why I love to learn? I love to learn because I grew up in a really cool family. All right? I grew up in a cool family where my father was the first person in his family to graduate from college. Okay? So he's a college graduate, loves to learn. In fact, he just got another master's degree just because at age 75 he went back to school and went to college again. My grandmother went to college, graduated in 1922 on my mother's side. A woman graduated from college in 1922 in the United States was a big, big deal. Okay? My mother, and she became a teacher. And then my mother was a teacher. And there, by the way, I am with the really, really cool. Is that like the coolest sweater? I think it's pretty cool. That's 1970 something, right? And so back up. If you were in my family, you found out that learning was important, and my family taught me. Excuse me, allergies. Taught me that learning really was important, and I remember learning how to read. Actually, at the kitchen table, taught by my mom. All right, and then I passed that on to my own children. So Caleb, right here, is a university student at the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, studying to be an urban minister. Katie wants to be a teacher, an English teacher. She's in university, and then Emily, who is just a few feet away from me right now, she's getting ready for school. She wants to be a veterinarian. She's still in secondary school, and then my wife is a nurse. So we are basically a bunch of crazy learners. But now here's the problem. I believe that we have school backwards. We are doing school backwards. Now, how many of you in the audience are parents? So raise your hand. Are you parents? You got your own children? Yeah. So a bunch of you are parents. Have you ever had this experience at home? Have you ever sat at the kitchen table like I have with my son or my daughters, and they've been frustrated with their homework because they couldn't do it, and they were stuck and they were trying to get help? Just a couple of days ago, Emily said, "Dad, can you help me on my homework?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." She's taking chemistry, and of course my main topic that I taught in school was chemistry. So I'm a chemistry teacher. So she said, "Can you help me?" I said, "Sure." That's great, right? And you know what? School works sometimes for the right kids. Because you see, here's the problem. I think we are sending our students home to do the hard stuff. Now, what do I mean by the hard stuff? All right? Well, let's think of it in terms of Bloom's taxonomy. So if you look at Bloom's taxonomy, if you were to look into my classroom for the first 19 years now, let's say that. If you were to look at my classroom, I did most of my class time was in the bottom two tiers of Bloom's. Remembering and understanding. Lower level cognitive tasks. And then I sent my students home to analyze, apply, create, etc. This is the hard stuff. I sent them home to do the hard stuff. And you know what? If your name is Emily Bergman, it works just fine. You know why it works? Because when you come home, you have help. But you know what? Not all kids have that opportunity, do they? Some kids do not have that opportunity to go home and get the help they need. So what if you flipped Bloom's taxonomy? What if instead of taking class time to do this was done at home? And then the hard stuff was done in class with what I would say is the most valuable resource in all of education. You know what that is? That's you and you and you. It's the teacher. So let's do the hard stuff with the kids present. Because we're sending kids home to do stuff and they can't. And then we complain. We say, well, they can't do their homework. They don't do their homework. Those kids. That's not true. Sometimes they go home and they can't. They didn't grow up like me in an educationally privileged home. I grew up in an educationally privileged home. When I came home from school, I had help. Some kids don't have that. The parents are too busy, or they don't have the resources themselves to get their kids the help they need. We need to flip our class to actually set education right. This came, by the way, where did the flipped classroom come from? Really, it was built in a real classroom. So this is Aaron and myself in room 313 and 314 at rural Woodland Park High School in Colorado. So we did this for many years in Colorado. I've moved to Chicago, Aaron to Pittsburgh. And so this slide is here twice. I don't know why. So here's the key question I want you to ask, and I'm going to try and a couple of things. I think the key question to ask is this: what is the best use of your face-to-face class time? So you as a teacher, you spend time with your kids. You've got them every day, maybe 3 days a week, whatever it might be. You've got them for a certain number of minutes every day. What's the best use of your face-to-face time? I'm going to argue that time is not best used delivering information. It's something else. Okay, now there isn't a right answer to this question, but there's a wrong answer. That's delivering direct instruction. What is the answer? So for me, as a science teacher, I had this much stuff to cover, but I only had this much time. So in the flipped classroom, all we did, guys, is we took the lecture piece. Not all class was lecture. We put that in the homework space and took the stuff at the homework place and put it here. Okay, that's the flipped classroom. In a nutshell, it's a very simple idea, okay? We're pretty simple people. So it's a simple idea, but it had amazing, amazing consequences. Because essentially, here's how I answered this question. What's the best use of my face-to-face class time? If it's not me delivering direct instruction, it is this. I wanted my students to get help on the hard stuff. And, by the way, I also wanted them to do more hands-on laboratory experiences. That's what I wanted my kids to do. And this freed me up to do that. But that's how I answered that as a science teacher. Let me just take a very different answer, and it looks different. I presented a presentation like this to some teachers. I had 3 teachers who came up to me and said, Mr. Bergman, we would love to flip our class. I said, that's great, great. So tell me, what do you teach? You know what they said? We're the physical education department. I said, huh? Really? Talk to me. They said, John, when you ask this question, what's the best use of our face-to-face class time? You know what they said? They said, we want our students to move their bodies. We spend far too much time telling them how to move their bodies. So they made these crazy short videos. And it was amazing how it changed and transformed their classroom. We're going to skip that because of time. Let's take a little gander at some short video clips of some different teachers and some of the videos that they're assigning for their students. So let's watch a couple, 3 minutes of these.
Using his superpowers, the superhero A will say his name and put up his big muscle arms and say A.
A.
Now with those phrases, what we can do is simply say me gusta and then attach them to the end. So an example, I could say, picking from that list, me gusta tocar la guitarra.
Well, see, you guys had developed this massive bomb that you used on Japan after World War II.
Welcome, class. Today I will be sharing with you how to make a fruit smoothie. These things are scrumdiddlyumptious, tasty good.
Because, as you can see, it's fizzing right here. It's producing a gas, and it's bubbling over.
Another thing I want to talk about is cells are not boring. When I grew up, I had this idea that a cell was like a bag of jelly and you had stuff like a nucleus inside it and it would essentially float around.
Here in Woodland Park, we're at a higher altitude, so the temperature is actually boiling at 92 degrees Celsius.
A biography is a story, a nonfiction story, written about someone by someone else. And I have an example here. It is my Lady Gaga biography.
Pringles potato chip bag. Now, compared to what we saw, it's totally full. Boils a lot of action.
Diagonals, right triangles.
Hypotenuse is across from the right angle.
Legs are A and B. Hypotenuse B.
Plug the numbers in and see how easy it can be.
A squared plus B squared C squared. A squared plus B squared C squared.
I'm excited. You're excited. I know you guys just want to get through algebra, and so you want to get through it, and I'm going to get to it. We're going to talk about radicals and square roots, and the difference between the two is very slight. This little sign right here, this symbol, is called a radical.
So hopefully that gives you a flavor of the videos that the teachers are making. Now, they're not crazy high quality. They're not made in a production studio. They are usually screen capture software. In fact, I could be capturing this whole presentation right here on my iPad through my computer. It's really not that hard to do. Some people asked a couple of questions about the videos, and let me just address a few of those. Maybe these are questions you'd ask, is how long should the videos be? My recommendation is short, okay? And so to give you kind of a number, I think kind of my rule of thumb is between 1 and 1.5 minutes per grade level. So if you've got a grade 4 student, that's 4 to 6 minutes. If you've got a grade 10 student, that'd be 10 to 15 minutes. Now this may seem weird, that you say, wait a second, John, I normally teach in my lectures 30 minutes or 40 minutes. I promise you, when you make a video, it's going to cut your lecture time almost in half. And sometimes even more than half. So there's that's something that's important. So people who are doing the flipped class wrong are making videos that are 45 minutes long or whatever it might be. You need to make shorter videos that are very kind of one topic per video. Another question people ask about the videos is who should make the videos. They ask the question, should I just, I mean, there's many videos on the internet, and I could go to YouTube and find some pretty good videos. And you know what, you can. In fact, I've got a bunch of them referenced on my website. But let me go back to something I said a little bit ago, that good teaching is about relationships. And so if I, let's put it like a continuum. On this side, I make all my own videos. And on this side, somebody else makes all the videos. Oops. All the own videos. So what I would say is the answer is actually closer to this side. I forgot what side it was. You should make more of the videos because you are their teacher. When you're their teacher, they know you. In fact, what some kids will say when you flip your class, they'll go home to their parents and they'll say, "My teacher's not teaching anymore." And that's not true. Yes, you are teaching, but if you're just using somebody else's video, they may have some truth. See, the key to the flipped classroom is actually, well, let's get to that. Okay. We're going to skip a couple of slides. Hold on, because I'm looking at time. Let me address a couple of critical questions that are often talked about in the flipped class. And one thing that people get kind of they say, well, you really haven't changed education. All you're doing is recording lectures, and lectures are bad. And I don't really agree that all lectures are bad. I mean, you're listening to a lecture right now, and I think there's some value in being introduced to new topics in kind of a lecture format. But the key thing is it's just not always about the videos. It's actually about the engaged things that you can do in class, the hard stuff that I talked about earlier. You want to be doing the hard stuff, the more difficult cognitive tasks when you're in the same space, physical space, as, well, your kids. So it's not about the videos, it's about that. Now, the two common questions that are always asked, and I'm sure this would be asked in Estonia, is what do you do with students who do not have access to technology? What if they don't have an iPad like I do, or you've got maybe a cell phone, or what do you do with that? So let me first of all tell you that that's a problem we had. So we were teaching a small rural school in Colorado, and a lot of our kids didn't have access to the internet at home, 25% in fact. And so what we did is we, number one, some kids had computers at home, but they did not have the internet, and so we got flash drives or thumb drives. I'm not sure what would translate best. And we dragged and dropped the video files onto those thumb drives. And then some kids didn't even have a computer at home, but they did have a device. Now remember, this is 2007, and when I mean a device, what I'm actually talking about is an iPod, that first generation iPod that could play a video. And so the kid would bring me their iPod, I would connect it to my computer, take my mouse, drag and drop it, and then they had it on their device. Okay? And then we had kids who didn't have any of those devices, but they had one device at home that is pretty universal in the United States, and I'll bet it's true in Estonia too. They had a television. And in a television, it plays videos. If you have a DVD, so they had a DVD player attached, or it was built in or something like that. And so we burned some DVDs, handed those out to our students, and all of our students got access that way. Now, there's lots of ways to provide access. There are schools of great poverty, even in the United States, who are flipping their classes, and kids, they've figured out how to do this. Now, the second sort of burning question that's probably on your lips is this. What if they don't watch the videos? And let me first of all say this. Do you have kids who don't do homework now? Yes, right? Do you have kids who won't watch the videos? Yep, that's right. So first of all, let me just say this. This won't completely solve that problem. But let me say this. One thing that we did, and this may not apply as much at the university level, but this is what we did with our students. At the beginning of class, we actually assigned points, 10 points, for each video that they watched. And the way that we checked is at the beginning of class, I simply walked around the room and I said, show me your notes. Low tech, me with a clipboard, paper, and pencil. And if you showed me notes, you got 10 points. And if you didn't, you didn't. And if you didn't take the notes and watch the video, I sent you to the back of the room. Not because it was a bad place, but that's where I had a couple of computers. And the students then watched the videos in class while everybody else is getting the help on the hard stuff. They quickly learned it was actually easier for them to watch the video than to not watch the video. And then also they lost some points, and so that's, for some kids, that was a motivation. So there's lots of ways to do this, but you can make this. In fact, you know what we're finding? More students will do this homework than the old homework. And you know why? I think because they can. Some kids go home, and they look at the homework and they go, I don't know how to do this. I'm lost. What do I do? And they can't. Because they don't have the help at home. They aren't like my daughter Emily, who said a couple of days ago, Dad, can you help me on my chemistry? And I said, yeah. All right. I mean, she attends a school that's 6 houses that direction. Very well thought of school in the Chicago metropolitan area. A lot of people would love to send their kids there. And her friends, they don't have a chemistry teacher for a dad at home. So even though there's lots of people with, a fair amount of money around here, and they can help their kids and provide, their kids are even still lost. All right? So I'm going to actually challenge us a little bit here. We have just a few minutes. And I want to make a kind of it may seem somewhat of a distinction, but flipped class and flipped learning, you probably thought they were the same thing. But I'm going to tell you that they're not. Flipped class is one thing, and flipped learning is something else. So when you think flipped class, I like you to call it flipped class 101, or possibly the traditional flipped class. It's a synchronous environment where on Tuesday night everybody watches the same video or whatever, and then on Wednesday they all do the same engaged activity. And then you repeat that process several days a week. Not always every day, by the way. That's flipped classroom, and that's what everybody thinks about when they think about the flipped classroom. But since Aaron and I are kind of the pioneers of this movement, we want to say there's something deeper that we're going to call flipped learning. And this, I think, is best illustrated with this graphic. So in this graphic, think of it this way. You start at Flipped Class 101. So what we've found is that most students, or most teachers spend about 1 year, sometimes 2, doing Flipped Class 101, the synchronous environment. And then they move to something deeper. They move to Flipped Mastery, to Flipped and Peer Instruction, Flipped Project-Based, Genius Hour, and then an inquiry technique that we've fallen in love with called Explore, Flip, Apply. And some have even moved to gamification. So, a lot of these things that we want to do in the 21st century, you see, these things over here, you know, these things on the right, these things we've been wanting to do in our classes for a long, long time, but we haven't known how to do it. And you see, I think the flipped classroom is better thought of as a gateway, as a transition to the deeper learning. In fact, this really mirrors the way we've written books. I don't know if you're familiar, we've written books. In fact, I've got one right here. This is our first book. It's called Flip Your Classroom. Okay? Our second book, coming out June 1st, so in just a month or whatever, I guess, is called Flipped Learning, Gateway to Student Engagement. It's about getting deeper. It's the second level of the flipped classroom. So if you're looking for a definition, I'm not going to go, it's kind of hard to read and may not translate super well, is that if you go to our nonprofit website, flippedlearning.org/definition, I encourage you to go there and read our definition. We've got a really good definition where we talk about, well, it's moving the direct instruction from the group space to the individual space. Maybe I'll talk about this. So the definition is move the direct instruction, the lecture, if you will, from the group space to the individual space. Now notice I didn't always say to the homework space, because there are some people who are doing what some people are calling the in-flip, inside the classroom flip, where they're doing it inside the classroom. So that solves the problem if you don't have like devices for every kid at home or whatever. But then it changes the classroom into a dynamic, interactive environment where the educator guides the students as they apply, that's one of those upper level Bloom's things, and engage in the subject matter. And this definition, and there's kind of a whole big document I would encourage you to read, is starting to be translated into many, many languages. And so maybe it should be translated for you guys as well. So let me introduce, remember I just showed you some graphics real fast here about some different levels of flipped. And so I want us to talk about this model, Flipped Mastery. And Flipped Mastery, by the way, we did talk about in this first book. It's the second half of the first book. But let me just walk you through just real crazy quickly about this one. So in a Flipped Mastery classroom, well, you know the best way to understand a Flipped Mastery classroom is to watch. So I'm going to show you a crazy short video clip of Aaron's classroom. Why don't you, as you watch this, notice what is and is not happening. So hopefully you kind of got a flavor of what the classroom looks like. It's active, it's engaging, the kids are doing a lot of different things, they're all kind of at a different place. It is truly an amazing place to happen. So in a Flipped Mastery model, you start with the direct instruction, practice, apply, assess, and remediate. The key to a flipped mastery classroom is when a kid gets to the end of some content and they haven't learned it, they stay there till they learn it. All right, we expected our kids to actually had to, not just expected, they had to pass the test before they could move on. So once they got to the end of a unit, they had to score 75% or better on their test. If they couldn't, they stayed there until they learned it. Because the problem that's been is, that I did for my first 19 years is when you got, guys, I've taught everything you're supposed to know. The test is on Friday. Good luck. And then I flipped my class. And I said, test is on Friday. Good luck. And then I graded the test over the weekend. And then what did I do on Monday? I moved on. But what if the kid didn't get it? Well, too bad. We're moving on. And then they just get lost, especially in our content of chemistry. All right. So some benefits. We found kids were becoming independent learners. They were learning how to learn for themselves. We were able to differentiate. We're able to teach to the smart kids and the kids who struggled in class. In a master model, the kids actually learned it. There were no gaps. They actually learned it. They didn't miss content. And another thing that is pretty powerful is that in a flipped master classroom, I think in a flipped classroom, is that kids don't have a chance to hide. I mean, hasn't it been this way? Is you walk into your classroom and you teach your lesson, and 5 or 6 kids raise their hands and interact with you, but the rest of them don't. They're on Facebook, or they're tuned out, or they're lost. Now I'm going to walk around and I'm going to talk to every kid. In fact, the subtitle of our book is Reach Every Student in Every Class Every Day, because we were able to talk to every kid in every class every day. It was just amazing. And what do parents think? The key to parents is actually just communication. Communicate to them. Hold on. Communicate to them about what you're doing, that you're doing things differently. And let's hear from a few students as they talk. Maybe. You know what? I will skip that. Oh, there we go.
Last year I had like a D, and now I have like an A.
You went from a D to an A?
Yeah.
Good job.
I can go back and look at my notes on the test. It helps me so much because I use the same ideas on there as the test, and then I get like A's and B's on my tests.
You went from a D to an A.
Yeah.
That's way cool.
Last year my highest grade was a C, like the whole year.
Highest grade, so that means you had lots of D's.
Yeah, lots of D's, and it was on my test. And this year I'm an A.
You're an A as well. That's really very cool. So how does that make you feel?
Good. Yeah. Like, it's easier. I thought, coming here, it would be like harder and I would have a D the whole year, but it's easier. So.
D students oftentimes don't go to college, but A students do. So, has this changed your thoughts on what's going to happen, in 3 years or whatever?
Yeah, a little bit. Like, last year I thought I probably wasn't going to get accepted to, like, high schools, like Oxford, Harvard, and stuff like that. Being a D student or A student, like, I can apply to, like, higher colleges now.
So this is a student in a school in the Chicago area that hasn't done very well in school. She struggled in school, and now she's in a flipped classroom, and it's working. And I think as I listen to her voice, I hear hope. Hope that her life could be different and could be better. So is this the answer? Is the flipped classroom the answer to all of education? And I'm going to say this. No. Here's what I think it is. I think it's a stepping stone. So let's say that you have a teacher who's lectured for 19 years. That would actually be me. And then you say, I want you to record your lessons using some software that's on a device, which is easy to use. I said, okay, let's do that. Did that for a year. And then the next year, I said, Aaron and I said together, really, we said, well, what if we have them watch them ahead of time? And that, you see, that's an easy step. But that step took us a year. And then next year, we did flipped mastery, which is now flipped learning, a variety of flipped learning. And then we actually began to even do more. We added elements of universal design for learning, and then project-based. And actually, each of those was a step that took us, well, actually a year. And so these steps, it's a stepping stone. So if you think of, if you're on one side of the river, and on one side of the river is where you're at, a more traditional 19th century model, and on the other side is the 21st century education that we want all kids to get. How do you get there? You go to a teacher and you say, you've got to teach this way. I think that's unrealistic. I think you say, record, then flip. You see, and they can take those steps incrementally, and it leads to the change that we want teachers to undergo. And we're going to skip that too because of time. So where do you start? How do you start this whole process? First of all, one thing interesting that I haven't already said is, we flipped our whole class. But do you realize that you can flip one lesson? You don't have to flip a whole class. You can flip an individual lesson. All right? I'm going to skip my metaphor. It may not work. But let me give you a couple of resources as we outtake. Is that flippedclass.com would be a great place to go to learn more. So flippedclass.com. That's Aaron's and my website. There's a couple of books you may want to get. Our first book has been translated into many languages, but I don't think in Estonian. So, unfortunately. But it's in French. It's in Spanish. And lots of Asian languages as well. I think the Swedish translation is coming soon, too. So, our second book comes out June 1st, but of course it'll only be in English. One thing I encourage you to think about doing, if you're really interested, is I would encourage you to attend the Flipped Class Conference. It is June 23rd through 25th. Now, you'll say, wait a second, I can't get to the United States, to Pittsburgh, that's where Aaron lives, but we're going to live stream it. So right now, I'm being streamed to you from Chicago. And so you can attend the Flipped Class Conference because it'll be streamed. So you can actually attend it. And the crazy thing is you can actually have a voice in the room, because in each room that we're streaming from, you're going to have a question. Someone can type a question from Estonia, and then somebody's going to say, hey, a question from Estonia is such and such, and then the presenter is going to respond to you. So it is. So I encourage you to go to this website, flippedlearning.org, to learn more. So I am open now to some questions. For you all, or from you all.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
Yes.
Very extremely inspiring presentation. So I think we have just maybe time for one, maximum two questions. So please. So I would then maybe ask. So I look back at your graph, so where you put gamification to the second level. Does it mean that the teaching should be as playful as possible, or learning?
Yes. Actually, I think it was a continuum. Is that you still teach some content, and not all of learning is going to be super exciting, but we need to bring in more elements. I think it's a great word, of play into the classroom. Allow them to play. That one of the graphs, the Genius Hour graph, and that's kids get to kind of learn what they want to learn and to sort of play with learning. I kind of think a rule of thumb is like 80-20. So 80% cover your content, 20% let them play with what they want to learn about.
Does it then mean that the main institutions for teaching training should be some theater academies or something like that, so not teacher training institutions?
So yeah, I agree that we need to rethink the training of our teachers and what that looks like in light of the world. I mean, too many of our education institutions, well, they're still stuck in the last century.
Yeah, thank you. So please, does somebody have? So, okay, then thank you very much. It was really very interesting, and all the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It's nice seeing you guys all.